Michael, thank you so much for joining our Sun video to talk about some of the big issues that are affecting housing. Housing's set to be a very big topic of conversation when the general election comes quite soon. A lot of people are struggling to pay rent. There's an entire generation with, millions who can't afford to get on the housing ladder. So this is a really important topic, and you say that it is an issue you're very passionate about. And one area of housing that you have pledged to reform is the issue of ground rents. So could you please start by sort of telling Sun readers what you're going to do about this really feudal, crippling, unfair system where we see leaseholders who are good people who've worked hard, they've got on the property ladder, and some of them are being absolutely drowned out by these big investors who are charging for these huge ground rents. And even though, for some people the amounts might not seem like a lot, but they go up and up, and people feel like they've just lost control of the whole system. They're in distress. What is this bill going to do?
Well, no, you're absolutely right. Housing is a big issue. I know about it because as an MP, I have constituents who can't get on the housing ladder, who are paying a lot in rent. And I have two children who are both renters themselves. So it's personal to me. Leasehold is a particular problem. And it's a problem that's sort of unique to England because we have a system whereby when you buy a flat, in most cases, you don't fully own it. There's this antique form of property ownership called leasehold. So you get a mortgage, you buy the flat, you hope it's yours, and then you find that there are at least two ways in which it's not fully yours. The first is that you're paying service charges. Now, in some cases, that can be fair because, there are other flat owners, someone's got to pay for the common parts and all the rest of it. But ultimately, the owner of the whole block of flats, the owner of what's called the freehold, can charge what they like for service charges. And some of them are making out like bandits by charging far too much for that service. And on top of that, these freeholders, who are often shadowy companies that are based abroad, can also charge ground rent. And ground rent is literally money for nothing. It is the case that the corporations that own the freehold, the title to the whole property, can charge what they like. So we've been consulting on making sure that we can reduce ground rents and also make sure that service charges are transparent so that the scamsters and the bandits can be driven out of the market.
Okay, so you've been discussing various options about how to protect leaseholders from ground rents. One of them was a sort of cap altogether. One of them was to reduce the ground rents to peppercorn rates. Which option of the ones that have been floated about are you going for?
Well, I'm instinctively drawn to a peppercorn because money for nothing should mean that you should be paying as close to nothing as possible. I agree that if you've got a situation where people need some of that common work to be done, they need to make sure that there's renovation and so on. Service charges should be fair. But with ground rents, you really are paying for nothing. Now,
okay, so they're not going to be frozen at current rates. They're all going to become peppercorn.
well, my view is peppercorn is ideal. But one of the things that we have to take account of is that there are some companies, including pension funds, that have invested in these ground rents. And we've got to make sure that we do this move away in a way that doesn't lead to, for example, your pension, my pension, or rail workers' pensions being adversely affected. So moving to peppercorn, that has to be the ultimate destination. How quickly we can move there, that's something we're looking at the moment.
Okay, so you can't guarantee that this issue will be sorted in time for the next election?
I think what we can do is that we can show that we'll have passed into legislation either a rapid move to peppercorn or a stage-by-stage process whereby we get there.
So, as a Secretary of State, you will know all too well that colleagues in the lobbying industry work very hard night and day to push the agenda, whether it's a charity, whether it's industry sector, private company. And journalists experience similar lobbying efforts. And I was quite stunned actually by an email I got recently by what was sort of painted as these very poor and deprived pensioners. And I opened the email and it turns out that this is actually a lobbying effort to stop your bill altogether. Now, I'm sure the lobbyists who are working on behalf of the corporations that own so much of the ground rents have been banging at your door. Can you make a promise that you will not capitulate to the lobbyists who are trying to paint a sob story that this is going to affect, you know, the old granny down the street, that you're going to stay firm and that you're going to bring justice to members of the public who are being stung by, as you said, shadowy corporations charging unfair rates?
Absolutely. So we listen to all sorts of campaigners. And in particular, I pay close attention to grassroots campaigners, to people who actually are at the sharp end of what's going on. But you sometimes have fake grassroots campaigners, so-called AstroTurf organisations. And I think you've lighted on one. There's some guy who's masquerading as a champion for pensioners. In fact, he's just knee-deep, neck-deep in property interests. So, no, we're not going to cave in to that sort of lobbying. We will listen to companies that make fair arguments about how we need to make sure that we can transition from an imperfect situation to a better one, but we're certainly not going to cave in. Just because people have deep pockets and they represent vested interests, we shouldn't, cave into them when there are hundreds of thousands of people, hard-working people, who have tried incredibly hard to make sure they get a deposit together, they get on the housing ladder, and then, as we've discussed, they suddenly find that they're paying extra for no service at all. That's got to end.
Fantastic. And another argument being put forward by the corporations who really benefit from ground rates is that they're going to come and they're going to sue you for billions. They're going to bankrupt Britain if this bill goes ahead. What do you make of that argument that they have this really strong legal case and therefore you should back down now?
No, I don't think that's the case at all. And, obviously, if it is the case that some of these organisations want to challenge what we're doing in court, let them. If they want to say, do you know what, we want to stand on the side of greed and exploitation, fine, let them make that case in court. To my mind, the whole point about Parliament is to represent the people of this country, and the overwhelming majority of people who are involved in the world of home ownership are people who are doing the right thing, and we've got to be on their side.
And can you see Britain in the near future where the system of leaseholds is abolished altogether?
Well, I think what we want to do is to make sure that the business model is so fundamentally altered. So if you've had something like leasehold that's been in place for hundreds of years, it's very difficult to immediately say, right, it's abolished at a stroke. But what you can do is you can get rid of the abuses. So you can say, once you've bought a flat, then it's yours. And yes, there might be either a freeholder who still charges you for some services, or you can have a new model called common hold, whereby all of the people in the flat together manage the block of flats together. To my mind, it doesn't matter which, provided it's fair. And most people will understand that you'll pay from time to time, to keep the staircases, the lifts or whatever in a good state of repair for all of the people in the flat. But what you can't have is an organisation just bilking people in those flats for money without a proper service.
Penny Mordaunt did not announce that the Renters Reform Bill will be coming to the House of Commons in the next fortnight. You told Laura Kuenssberg, and millions of young people saw clips of that interview. You said, by the time there is a general election, there will be no Section 21 bans. I'm sure you are a man of your word, but just to reassure all the people out there who are a bit worried perhaps by not hearing about the bill today, can you please remake that promise that it will be banned by the general election?
Yes. We made a promise in our manifesto in 2019. Boris told the country then that we would get rid of no-fault evictions. And it's really important that we do, because these evictions, the Section 21 evictions as they're called, are ways whereby a small minority of unscrupulous landlords can say to people who are renting, either accept massive increases in your rents, or we'll evict you, or shut up about the poor condition of your flats, or we'll evict you. And that is a tool that, as I say, a small minority, but a real minority that we have to worry about use. So I've been talking to MPs across the House of Commons in order to make sure that we can get this bill through. I listened to all sorts of MPs about how we can improve it, but the key thing that we've been clear about is that we need to make sure that no-fault evictions end.
Great. Now, I'm sure you are well aware that among the 47 backbenchers who have signed amendments to the Renters Reform Bill in an effort to stop Section 21 going ahead, 14 of those Tory MPs are landlords. Are you being bullied by Tory MP landlords, and are you giving in to them?
No. The key thing is, I listen to MPs from across the House of Commons, Conservatives, Liberal Democrat, Labour, all of whom have ideas about how to improve legislation. I don't think there's ever been a bill that's been introduced into the House of Commons that hasn't been improved. That's what MPs' jobs are about. And some of the people who are landlords often have very good ideas because they're people, certainly all the people I know in the House of Commons who are landlords, who are thoughtful, serious people who provide a great service for their tenants. And we just want to make sure that this bill works for them as well, because you need a healthy private rented sector. And the overwhelming majority of landlords do a great job. They want to have a relationship with their tenant that goes beyond just cash. They want to make sure that they're providing a service that the tenant appreciates. So, of course, I'll listen to landlords, but the commitment is clear. We need to end no-fault evictions.
And when MP landlords personally come to you to argue against this bill, there is no personal interest in them.
No, I don't believe so. No.
They have renters' interests completely.
Yeah, because the thing is that every MP is representing their constituents. Some MPs will have specialist knowledge, whether they're landlords, farmers, doctors, scientists, and it's worth listening to that. But ultimately, the House of Commons has to act in the national interest, and we've got to keep our promises. Boris made this promise, Liz made this promise, Rishi made this promise, and so we've got to keep our promise.